The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble steps of Buckingham Palace as King Charles III adjusted his ceremonial uniform one final time. Today marked the end of an era that few outside the inner circles of European diplomacy truly understood. President Frank-Walter Steinmeier of Germany was concluding his remarkable tenure, and the British royal family had decided this farewell would be unlike any other in recent memory. Charles had known Steinmeier for over 2 decades, long before either man had ascended to their current positions. Their relationship began in the late 1992s, when Charles was still the Prince of Wales, deeply involved in environmental causes and sustainable development projects. Steinmeier, then a rising figure in German politics, had approached Charles during a climate conference in Berlin. What started as a formal diplomatic introduction had evolved into a genuine friendship built on shared concerns about the future of Europe and the world. The decision to host this elaborate farewell ceremony had not come lightly. Charles and his advisors had spent weeks planning every detail, understanding that this moment represented more than just protocol. Steinmeier had been instrumental in strengthening Anglo-German relations during some of the most challenging periods in recent European history. From navigating Brexit complications to coordinating responses to global crises, the German president had proven himself a steadfast ally and trusted partner. Camilla, now Queen Consort, had her own special connection to this farewell. During her years of adapting to royal life, Steinmeier and his wife Elke had become unexpected sources of support and friendship. The German president's wife had helped Camilla navigate the complex world of international diplomacy with grace and wisdom. Their bond had been forged through countless state dinners, cultural exchanges, and quiet conversations about the challenges of public life. The palace staff had been working around the clock to prepare for what many were calling the most significant farewell ceremony of Charles's reign thus far. The state dining room had been transformed with flowers representing both British and German heritage. Roses from the palace gardens were arranged alongside German lilacs, creating a fragrant backdrop that spoke to the deep cultural connections between the two nations. As the morning progressed, Charles found himself reflecting on the many conversations he had shared with Steinmeier over the years. The German president had a unique ability to see beyond immediate political concerns and focus on long-term solutions. Whether discussing renewable energy initiatives or cultural preservation projects, Steinmeier always brought a thoughtful perspective that Charles deeply valued. The guest list for today's ceremony read like a who's who of European leadership and cultural figures. Representatives from across Germany's political spectrum had made the journey to London, along with business leaders, artists, and academics who had worked closely with Steinmeier during his presidency. The British side was equally well represented, with senior members of parliament, cultural institutions, and civil society organizations all eager to participate in this historic farewell. One of the most meaningful aspects of the planned ceremony was the presentation of a specially commissioned piece of art. Charles had personally overseen the creation of a unique sculpture that incorporated elements from both British and German artistic traditions. The piece, created by a collaborative team of artists from both countries, represented the ongoing cultural dialogue that Steinmeier had championed throughout his presidency. The morning's final preparations included a private moment between Charles and Camilla as they reviewed their remarks for the ceremony. Both understood the weight of their words and the importance of striking the right tone. This was not just a formal diplomatic farewell, but a celebration of friendship, partnership, and shared values that had helped shape modern Europe. As guests began arriving at the palace, the atmosphere was one of celebration mixed with genuine emotion. Many of those present had witnessed firsthand the positive impact of Steinmeier's leadership and his ability to bridge differences through thoughtful dialogue and principled action. The farewell ceremony represented not just the end of his presidency, but the conclusion of a chapter in European cooperation that had yielded remarkable results. The sound of the palace orchestra tuning their instruments drifted through the corridors as final preparations were completed. Today would be remembered as more than just another state occasion. It would stand as a testament to the power of personal relationships in international diplomacy and the lasting impact that principled leadership can have on the world stage. Charles took one last look at his reflection, knowing that the ceremony ahead would be both a celebration of past achievements and a commitment to continuing the important work of building bridges between nations. The friendship between Britain and Germany, strengthened through years of collaboration with Steinmeier, would serve as a foundation for future cooperation and mutual understanding. The grand entrance hall of Buckingham Palace buzzed with anticipation as distinguished guests from across Europe gathered for the unprecedented farewell ceremony. Ambassador after ambassador arrived, each representing not just their nations but the complex web of relationships that President Steinmeier had carefully woven during his years in office. The German delegation was particularly impressive, including former chancellors, current cabinet ministers, and leaders from Germany's most influential cultural institutions. Camilla moved gracefully through the receiving line, her years of experience evident in how naturally she connected with each guest. Her conversation with Dr. Elke Steinmeier was particularly warm, the two women sharing memories of their various meetings over the years. They had first met during a cultural exchange program in 2018, where Camilla had been impressed by Elke's deep knowledge of European literature and her passion for promoting educational opportunities for young people across the continent. The ceremony's unique format had been Charles's idea, inspired by his desire to move beyond traditional diplomatic protocol. Rather than a formal state banquet, he had envisioned something more personal and meaningful. The main event would take place in the palace's music room, where guests would be seated in an intimate circle, creating an atmosphere more conducive to genuine conversation and reflection. As the crowd gathered, stories began circulating about Steinmeier's many contributions to international cooperation. Lord Cambridge, Britain's former ambassador to Germany, shared tales of late-night negotiations, where Steinmeier's calm presence and analytical mind had helped resolve seemingly impossible disagreements. During the height of the refugee crisis in 2015, Steinmeier had worked tirelessly with British officials to develop humanitarian responses that balanced compassion with practical considerations. The artistic centerpiece of the ceremony was finally revealed as guests moved into the music room. The specially commissioned sculpture stood nearly 6 feet tall, its bronze and steel construction incorporating elements that told the story of British-German cooperation. Embedded within the piece were small fragments of stone from both Westminster Abbey and Cologne Cathedral, symbolizing the deep spiritual and cultural connections between the two nations. Charles's opening remarks were delivered without notes, speaking from the heart about his long friendship with Steinmeier. He recalled their first substantial conversation during an environmental summit in Hamburg, where they had discovered a shared passion for sustainable agriculture. That conversation had led to numerous collaborative projects, including a groundbreaking initiative to share organic farming techniques between British and German rural communities. The king's voice carried genuine emotion as he described Steinmeier's unique approach to leadership. Unlike many politicians who focused primarily on immediate gains, the German president had always maintained a longer perspective, asking how decisions made today would affect future generations. This philosophy had made him an invaluable partner in addressing climate change, technological innovation, and social challenges that required sustained cooperation between nations. Camilla's contribution to the ceremony was equally heartfelt, focusing on the cultural bridges that had been built during Steinmeier's presidency. She spoke about the remarkable expansion of student exchange programs, the collaborative art exhibitions that had toured both countries, and the joint research projects that had advanced understanding in fields ranging from renewable energy to historical preservation. One of the most touching moments came when a group of young musicians performed a piece that had been specially composed for the occasion. The composition blended traditional British and German folk melodies, creating something entirely new, while honoring both musical traditions. The performers included students from both countries who had participated in cultural exchange programs facilitated by Steinmeier's initiatives. Dr. Steinmeier's response to these tributes revealed the depth of his own attachment to the relationship with Britain. He spoke candidly about the challenges faced during his presidency, particularly the difficult period following the Brexit referendum. Rather than allowing political disagreements to damage personal relationships, he had worked tirelessly to maintain channels of communication and cooperation. The president shared a previously unknown story about a critical moment during trade negotiations when a private conversation with Charles had helped break a deadlock. The king had suggested a compromise that addressed both British sovereignty concerns and German business interests, demonstrating how personal trust could overcome seemingly insurmountable political obstacles. As the formal presentations concluded, guests moved to the palace gardens for a reception that continued the evening's themes of friendship and cooperation. The garden party atmosphere allowed for more informal conversations, with small groups gathering around different areas to discuss specific aspects of British-German relations. The evening's guest book became a remarkable document, filled with messages from leaders, artists, academics, and citizens whose lives had been touched by Steinmeier's work. Many wrote about specific projects or initiatives that had made a difference in their communities, creating a comprehensive record of one man's impact on international cooperation. As darkness fell over London, the illuminated palace gardens provided a magical backdrop for conversations that would continue late into the night. The farewell ceremony had achieved its goal of celebrating not just Steinmeier's presidency, but the broader principle of international friendship based on shared values and mutual respect. The following morning brought a more private dimension to the farewell celebrations, as Charles and Camilla hosted an intimate breakfast for President Steinmeier and his immediate family. The yellow drawing room, with its warm morning light and comfortable furnishings, provided the perfect setting for personal conversations away from the formality of state protocol. Over tea and traditional British breakfast, the conversation naturally turned to family matters and personal reflections. Steinmeier spoke warmly about his grandchildren and their fascination with British culture, particularly their excitement about visiting the palace. Charles shared similar stories about his own grandchildren's curiosity about different countries and cultures, reflecting on how the younger generation seemed naturally inclined toward international friendship. The morning discussion revealed fascinating details about the behind-the-scenes work that had made so many collaborative projects possible. Camilla had played a more significant role than publicly known in facilitating cultural exchanges between British and German women's organizations. Her quiet diplomacy had helped establish mentorship programs that connected female entrepreneurs, artists, and community leaders across both countries. During breakfast, Steinmeier presented Charles and Camilla with a personal gift that had deep meaning for all involved. The leather-bound volume contained handwritten letters from German citizens whose lives had been positively affected by British-German cooperation initiatives. The letters told stories of students who had found life-changing opportunities through exchange programs, business partnerships that had created jobs in both countries, and cultural collaborations that had enriched communities. One particularly moving letter came from a young German engineer who had worked on renewable energy projects in Scotland. She wrote about how the experience had not only advanced her career but had given her a deep appreciation for British culture and values. Her story represented thousands of similar experiences that had created lasting bonds between the peoples of both nations. The breakfast conversation also touched on some of the more challenging moments of Steinmeier's presidency. The 2020 pandemic had tested international cooperation in unprecedented ways, and the German president had been instrumental in coordinating European responses. Charles recalled late-night phone calls during the early days of the crisis, when Steinmeier had helped facilitate sharing of medical supplies and research data between British and German health authorities. As they moved to Charles's private study for coffee, the discussion became even more personal. Steinmeier confessed that leaving office was bittersweet, particularly because he would miss the regular interactions with international colleagues who had become genuine friends. Charles assured him that their relationship would continue regardless of official positions, emphasizing that the bonds they had built were personal as well as diplomatic. The study walls were lined with photographs documenting various state visits and collaborative projects over the years. Steinmeier paused before one image showing himself, Charles, and several other European leaders at the signing of a renewable energy cooperation agreement. He remarked how that moment represented the kind of practical partnership that could address global challenges while strengthening international friendship. Camilla brought the conversation back to lighter topics by sharing plans for a cookbook project that would feature recipes from both British and German royal kitchens. The idea had emerged from conversations between palace chefs during various state visits, and Steinmeier enthusiastically endorsed the project as another way to celebrate cultural connections between the two countries. The morning's highlight was a private tour of Charles's organic garden, where the king showed off plants and techniques he had learned from German sustainable farming experts. Steinmeier was delighted to see how British royal agriculture had incorporated innovations developed in Germany, creating a living symbol of practical cooperation that produced tangible benefits. Their garden walk included stops at various experimental plots where different approaches to organic cultivation were being tested. Charles explained how German advisors had helped design water conservation systems that were now being used throughout royal properties. The collaboration had not only improved agricultural practices but had created educational opportunities for young farmers from both countries. As the private mourning concluded, Steinmeier expressed his gratitude for the extraordinary farewell celebration. He emphasized that the personal relationships built during his presidency represented one of his greatest accomplishments, particularly the deep friendship he had developed with Charles and Camilla. These connections would continue to benefit both nations long after his official duties ended. The informal atmosphere of the morning had allowed for conversations that would have been impossible during formal state occasions. Topics ranged from family traditions to philosophical discussions about leadership in the modern world. Both men agreed that international cooperation required not just political agreements but genuine human connections between leaders who trusted each other. As they prepared to transition to the day's public events, Charles presented Steinmeier with a final personal gift. The custom-made walking stick had been crafted by British artisans using wood from trees in both Windsor Great Park and the Black Forest. The symbolic gesture represented the deep roots of British-German friendship that would continue to grow regardless of political changes. The morning's conversations had reinforced what both leaders already knew. Their collaboration had created something more valuable than diplomatic success. They had built a model for international friendship based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine personal connection that would inspire future generations of leaders. The afternoon brought the most public dimension of the farewell celebrations, as Charles and Camilla joined President Steinmeier for a ceremonial visit to Westminster Abbey. The historic setting provided a profound backdrop for reflecting on the deeper spiritual and cultural foundations that had supported their years of cooperation. Dean of Westminster personally led the small procession through the ancient corridors, sharing stories about the Abbey's role in British-German relations throughout history. Standing before the tomb of Elizabeth I, Steinmeier remarked on the remarkable transformation in European relationships since the days when royal marriages were the primary means of international diplomacy. Charles noted how modern partnerships based on shared democratic values and mutual respect had proven far more durable than the dynastic alliances of earlier centuries. Their conversation highlighted the evolution of international relations from personal monarchy to institutional cooperation. The Abbey visit included a private moment at the grave of the unknown warrior, where both leaders laid wreaths in memory of those who had died in conflicts between their nations. The ceremony was particularly meaningful given the journey from wartime enemies to close allies that characterized modern British-German relations. Steinmeier spoke movingly about his grandfather's generation, who could never have imagined the friendship that now existed between former adversaries. Following the Abbey ceremony, the afternoon continued with a visit to the German Historical Institute in London. The research center had become a crucial hub for academic cooperation between British and German scholars, facilitating research projects that had enhanced understanding of shared European history. During Steinmeier's presidency, the institute had expanded its programs to include public education initiatives that brought historical scholarship to broader audiences. The institute's director presented an overview of ongoing projects that exemplified the kind of intellectual cooperation that Steinmeier had championed. British and German historians were collaborating on comprehensive studies of post-war reconstruction, medieval trade relationships, and the role of cultural exchange in building modern European identity. These academic partnerships had produced scholarship that neither country could have achieved independently. Camilla showed particular interest in the Institute's public programs, especially initiatives designed to help young people understand European history. She engaged with graduate students who were working on research projects that spanned both countries, asking thoughtful questions about their findings and their perspectives on contemporary British-German relations. Her genuine curiosity and knowledge impressed everyone present. The afternoon's centerpiece was a public lecture delivered by President Steinmeier at the Royal Institution, one of Britain's most prestigious scientific organizations. His address, titled Science, Democracy, and International Cooperation, drew connections between the scientific method and democratic governance that had particular relevance for British-German collaboration in addressing global challenges. Steinmeier's lecture highlighted specific examples of successful scientific cooperation between British and German research institutions. Climate research conducted jointly by universities in both countries had contributed crucial data to international understanding of environmental change. Medical research collaborations had accelerated development of treatments for various diseases, demonstrating how international cooperation could save lives and reduce suffering. The audience included leading scientists, policymakers, and students from universities across London. During the question period, several speakers reflected on how Steinmeier's approach to international relations had created space for scientific cooperation to flourish. One British researcher noted that the president's emphasis on evidence-based policy-making had helped establish productive relationships between research communities in both countries. Charles's response to the lecture emphasized the importance of scientific cooperation in addressing challenges that transcended national boundaries. He spoke about his own long-standing interest in sustainable development and how collaboration with German experts had enhanced British understanding of renewable energy, organic agriculture, and environmental protection. The King's remarks demonstrated how personal curiosity and genuine intellectual engagement had strengthened official diplomatic relationships. The afternoon concluded with a reception at the German ambassador's residence, where guests from throughout the day's events gathered for informal conversations. The relaxed atmosphere allowed for the kind of personal interactions that had always been central to Steinmeier's approach to diplomacy. Small groups formed around different topics, with animated discussions about everything from historical research to scientific innovation to cultural exchange programs. One of the most engaging conversations of the evening involved a group of young professionals from both countries who had participated in various exchange programs during Steinmeier's presidency. Their stories illustrated the practical impact of high-level diplomatic cooperation on individual lives and careers. Several spoke about how professional opportunities in the other country had shaped their understanding of European identity and international cooperation. The evening's guest book became another chapter in the documentation of Steinmeier's legacy, with entries from scientists, historians, diplomats, and students whose work had been enhanced by British-German cooperation. Many wrote about specific projects or opportunities that had emerged from the collaborative framework that Steinmeier had helped establish and maintain. As the reception continued into the evening, conversations naturally turned toward the future of British-German relations. There was general optimism that the foundations established during Steinmeier's presidency would continue to support cooperation, regardless of political changes in either country. The personal relationships, institutional connections, and shared projects had created momentum that would be difficult to reverse. The day's events had demonstrated the multiple dimensions of successful international cooperation, from the spiritual reflection at Westminster Abbey to the academic collaboration at the Historical Institute to the scientific partnership celebrated at the Royal Institution. Steinmeier's farewell was revealing the breadth and depth of connections that had been built over his years in office. The final evening of President Steinmeier's farewell visit unfolded as a private dinner at Clarence House, where Charles and Camilla had chosen to host the most intimate gathering of the entire celebration. The guest list was deliberately small, including only those individuals who had played central roles in building and maintaining the extraordinary relationship between the royal family and the German presidency over the past several years. The dining room at Clarence House, with its elegant yet comfortable atmosphere, provided the perfect setting for reflection and forward-looking conversation. Charles had personally selected the menu, incorporating dishes that represented the culinary traditions of both countries, while highlighting ingredients from sustainable farming projects that had benefited from British-German cooperation. The evening's wines included selections from organic vineyards in both nations that had shared techniques and expertise. As guests gathered for cocktails before dinner, the conversation naturally gravitated toward personal memories and behind-the-scenes stories that had not been shared publicly during the formal ceremonies. Steinmeier's wife, Elke, recounted amusing incidents from various state visits, including a memorable evening when protocol had gone awry, but the warmth of personal relationships had carried the day. These lighter moments provided balance to the more serious diplomatic discussions. The dinner table conversation revealed the extent to which personal friendships had influenced official policies and initiatives. Charles spoke candidly about how his trust in Steinmeier's judgment had enabled him to support various European initiatives that might otherwise have faced more skepticism from British institutions. The German president reciprocated by describing how Charles's environmental expertise had influenced German policy discussions about sustainable development. One of the evening's most meaningful exchanges occurred when Camilla presented a surprise gift to Elke Steinmeier. The beautifully bound volume contained letters from British women who had participated in cultural exchange programs facilitated by the German First Lady's initiatives. The letters expressed gratitude for opportunities that had expanded perspectives, created lasting friendships, and opened doors to new experiences and understanding. The letters told remarkable stories of personal transformation and international connection. A British artist described how a residency program in Berlin had revolutionized her understanding of contemporary European culture. A young entrepreneur wrote about mentorship relationships with German business leaders that had helped her develop innovative approaches to social responsibility. An educator shared how collaboration with German schools had enhanced her ability to prepare students for an interconnected world. Steinmeier's response to these personal testimonials was deeply emotional. He spoke about how individual stories like these had motivated his approach to international relations throughout his presidency. While political negotiations and policy agreements were necessary, the ultimate measure of diplomatic success was the impact on real people's lives. The letters demonstrated that British-German cooperation had created opportunities and experiences that would influence individuals and communities for generations. The evening's conversation also addressed the challenges that lay ahead for European cooperation. Brexit had created new complexities in British relationships with continental Europe, but the strong personal and institutional connections built during Steinmeier's presidency provided a foundation for navigating these difficulties. Both leaders expressed optimism that practical cooperation could continue even within new political frameworks. Charles raised questions about how international relationships would evolve as new generations of leaders emerged. Steinmeier shared his observations about young people's attitudes toward international cooperation, noting their natural inclination toward global thinking, but also their impatience with traditional diplomatic processes. The challenge for future leaders would be maintaining the benefits of patient relationship building while addressing younger generations' expectations for rapid progress on global challenges. The dinner's most poignant moment came during dessert, when Charles presented Steinmeier with a final personal gift. The custom-made watch incorporated gold from both British and German sources, with an inscription referencing their shared commitment to building bridges between nations. More importantly, Charles explained that the watch had been crafted by a young British artisan who had learned traditional techniques during an apprenticeship program in Germany. As the evening drew to a close, conversation turned naturally toward legacy and continuation. Steinmeier expressed confidence that the relationships and institutions built during his presidency would continue to benefit both countries regardless of political changes. The personal connections, academic collaborations, cultural exchanges, and business partnerships had created their own momentum that transcended individual political careers. The farewell dinner concluded with a toast that encapsulated the spirit of the entire celebration. Charles raised his glass not just to Steinmeier's presidency, but to the principle of international friendship based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine personal connection. The toast acknowledged that successful diplomacy required more than formal agreements. It demanded the kind of trust and understanding that could only develop through sustained personal relationships. As guests prepared to depart, there was a sense of conclusion, but not of ending. The farewell celebration had honored Steinmeier's contributions while affirming the continuing importance of the relationships he had helped build. The bonds between Britain and Germany, strengthened through years of thoughtful cooperation, would continue to serve both nations as they faced future challenges and opportunities together. The evening's final moments were captured in a group photograph that would join the historical record of British-German relations. More than a diplomatic memento, the image represented the human connections that had made extraordinary international cooperation possible. As Steinmeier prepared to return to Germany, he carried with him not just formal recognition of his service, but the knowledge that he had helped create lasting friendships that would benefit future generations.